It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents, and the cryptocurrencies and the billions and all of the things that make up our financial global system as they relate to sports. How you doing today, Steve?
Oh, good. I mean, my plan is to spend the majority, we're recording on Saturday. My plan is to spend the majority of Saturday studying and analyzing all the Grammy movies or the Oscar movies.
Oscars.
Preparation for the Oscars, which is coming out because it's very important to me. I think it's important to the world. Amy Schumer is a voice that can really unite people and bring people together and make people watch such an important show. I think the ratings will be spectacular.
Yeah, I don't expect many people to be watching the Oscars.
Hey, the 5 people who watch it should be, excited about it, presumably.
Yes.
Before we go on, real quick, rest in peace to Taylor Hawkins of the Foo Fighters, great band. Died Friday at some point. We could speculate about it, but rest in peace.
Yeah, I woke up to that news this morning as well, so that is very sad. All right, Steve, let's jump into it now. We try to avoid this topic. I know we're a Washington football whatever based podcasting network, and the Hogstye covers all things, fourth string linebackers, et cetera, but we just can't avoid business stories of the Washington franchise. And this week, I think, right? Wasn't it this week or late last week?
No,
anytime
this week.
recently.
It's been a long week.
Right. A pretty we've seen some drips of different sponsors back out, but they've been mostly small fish. Through these kind of media boycotts and all kinds of ways to try to take pound of flesh out of Daniel Snyder. But this is more than a pound of flesh, as Anheuser-Busch announces that they are pulling all sponsorships, beer partnerships, all the things that means off of Washington's balance sheet and disassociating themselves from the team. Now, not the league and something like 28 other franchises in the league, but Washington and Anheuser-Busch no longer have a relationship. This obviously affects a lot of things that Washington does, but in the big picture, what kind of blow do you think this is to Snyder's ownership?
I think it is a big blow. You can lose like some crappy medical sponsor, and don't forget that Dwight Scharr, who was the former minority partner of Washington, was the guy behind Inova, who was the sponsor of the Richmond Training Center, and then the place in Ashburn. Not surprising they left. A while ago, and then the other sponsor, Medline, that's not right, but something along those lines left. But that was money-wise, it was small. This is like $8 million a year, which is legitimate, and I think it's very, very telling, even more than the money, that Anheuser-Busch is an NFL sponsor, and like you said, an individual sponsor of 20-something, 20 whatever, however many teams. The fact that they left Washington and out of the blue a little bit, this is not something new, has not happened miraculously. So I think it's a major blow, and the team put out a press release and tried to blow it off and something along the lines of, we're excited about the opportunity to find another sponsor in the alcohol space, which of course is total garbage and nonsense. I mean, they don't want to do that. I think it's a major problem for them, and I think it's it could be a sign of worse things to come for the team. There's a site out there called boycottdan.com, if you've heard of this. I wrote personally under my real name, not under the Hogstye, under my stage name here. I wrote every single sponsor myself. I got one response back from USAA, mainly because I've been a customer of theirs for 30 years, and they gave me a legitimate response, but I didn't hear from any of the rest of them. But I think it could be a major problem for Washington.
That's such a great point that you bring up in terms of no new news. Now, news with this, is plentiful. So, you don't have to go that far back, but this isn't off the heels of some new deposition at Congress or, hearing or some new lawsuit or some new allegation, right? Basically since the commander's name day, right? Because it was the day after that the congressional, whatever that was, conversation happened, and that sort of, ramped up this sort of new round of allegations, et cetera. That's still been what? Well, that was what, 22222 or 23333, whatever.
It was two
So
two 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 two.
so it's been a minute since then. And so just out of the blue, you could have made it would have made more sense off the backs of news, right? There's no news. And so it feels like kind of a cold announcement, right? Which I think just shows you that there is stuff bubbling, right? Or that there is nervousness in the greater sponsorship community, in partners for the team, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's such a great point that you made, that this sort of started flat-footed. That to me is, obviously the sign of them leaving is the big sign, but just the way this happened also I think it portends
Danger.
Some weird things for Snyder. Yeah.
Yeah, because wait till the next shoe drops, because there'll be another. There always is another shoe with this franchise. Wait till the next shoe drop. And listen, Anheuser-Busch is a major international name. It's certainly one of their leading sponsors. We don't, the list of who pays them the most is not, it's not public information. It's a private company, but you have to think that, especially at $8 million a year, because that's major sponsor. That's getting up there to major sponsorship level. You have to think it was one of their biggest sponsors. Certainly in terms of what's the word? Most high profile. Thank God it's early. It's one of their most high profile sponsors. It really makes me wonder, because a lot of times these things, if you notice, Chris, I mean, I know you have, this kind of goes in waves. Once one domino falls, kind of they all start falling. And I think really what saved Washington so far is that Anheuser-Busch didn't make a public statement. They put out some Twitter thing that said we can no longer go along with this team that's been accused of abusing women or whatever. That the fact that they didn't do that probably saved the team, I think, of losing everybody.
Yeah, which was probably a favor to the NFL, if nothing else, right? Like, there's probably some, I don't think that has anything to do with their largesse or, any kind of relationship with Snyder and Washington. I think that has everything to do with their overall relationship with the league and whatever the other, majority of other teams that they do direct sponsorships with. So I don't even, it may have been a collateral benefit to Washington, but that wasn't who they were serving when they were vague with their statement.
Oh, no, yeah. They're not trying to do Dan Snyder a favor. They're trying to do themselves a favor by not getting completely out of the graces of the NFL. Because, if you give the NFL truth serum, they probably want Washington to go away too.
100%.
Yeah. Because if you think back to when the name Redskins changed, they got beat up for decades over it. There are the two lawsuits, all of that. What was the domino that caused everything to fall? It was FedEx.
Yeah.
And FedEx made a point of saying something in the public. And then what happened? Nike followed. We're not going to sell Redskins gear anymore. And that was when it all fell apart immediately, And so, yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's probably that Anheuser-Busch is trying to preserve its relationship with the rest of the NFL. Because you can sort of go to the NFL and go, look, can you blame us? We're going to drop Washington. We don't want to be associated with that train wreck. But we're going to maintain our relationship with everybody else. So we're just going to be quiet and quietly pull our money. That way we can look our shareholders in the face and say, we're not standing with a team that treats women so poorly. And, the best of both worlds. Yeah. But some of these, but I just have to think that this is not the only one. Really, I mean, if you were a sponsor, I mean, would you want to continue your relationship with an organization like this? I mean, I know I wouldn't.
I think it's tough, and these kind of things are generally, like you said, follow the leader situation. So if a sponsor with the brand reach of an Anheuser-Busch and the brand allegiance with the NFL, I mean, who can separate? Well, it's hard to separate beer and football as a concept, and then Anheuser-Busch is a major, cultural sponsor. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is as part of the league's last 40+ year history as anything, and so. there will be others that will take this as the cover of night, right? Like if Anheuser-Busch can do this, then why not Pepsi? Why not other, other brands? And so, and, yes, I totally agree that those other minor sponsors all sort of were either small fish or made sense from the Dwight Schrute perspective. But now you add Anheuser-Busch at the top of that list, and they're not alone either, so you start, it's starting to be a chorus, with companies of different sizes. And I'm sure that NFL front office basically said, you can do what you want to do. We get it. We understand. If we could be this clean about it, we would too. But just keep the ripples contained, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Just keep the fallout. Let's minimize the fallout. Not because we love Dan. It's because
the thing to watch will be the defense contractors, right? It'll be the big, huge industrial money, because it's Washington, right? They're not necessarily in Cleveland or, but, because Washington's what it is, federal dollars, just be the nature of being the, the capital of the United States of America means all. And if you start to see those things start to crumble or waver, that's, we're always just judging when it's more painful for the league to keep them or jettison, right? It's just some weird formula out there that the NFL has when they know when one side, even if it's 55%, 45, when something flips, it'll be when the screws start to turn on Snyder. And, there are big team and NFL relationships with a power seat like Washington. And if they start getting cold feet and start causing a problem behind these big commercial brands, then you really will know.
Yeah, in terms of USAA, I'm not going to publish response I got because it has my real name on it and everything. But essentially, what they said is, and because I got a substantive response from somebody, because again, I've been a USA member for going on 30 years now, and I said that in the email and said, hey, you guys, I'm a longtime customer. Anyway, they wrote back and basically, in essence, said, we get it. We understand the situation's awful, but we're monitoring it for now, and we haven't made a decision. That's what USA basically said. But I think when Anheuser-Busch does that, it's top cover for all the little, certainly for all the little guys.
100%.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, how hard is it must be for their in-house marketing people? Right now, how are you going to replace Anheuser-Busch? Who would want to replace Anheuser-Busch? Somebody's going to want to be the provider in the stadium of drinks, right? You have that. But in terms of being public, they can, if you guys don't know how beverages work, basically you can sign up with a provider and then they will provide you with a number of brands. I mean, they can get drinks in the stadium through a middleman, but I don't know are they going to go to, what's another beer company? Miller Lite, Coors,
right? Yeah.
Are they going to want to sign up for this and be proud of their sponsorship and have a press conference and all that? Here's where I want to go with this, and I know we want to move on here probably, but the name change. The new name is the Washington Commanders, which I hate. But point is, in my view, that is and was a clear attempt to distract the fan base and the sponsors from what's really going on. It's essentially, you've got a dog in front of you and you wave a shiny toy over here to distract you from the fact that somebody's opening the door and leaving the house. Look over here, shiny toy. Yeah, new name, Commanders, get excited. What it really is, it's just a big cover up. And I'm not dumb enough to fall for it. Frankly, that's in no small part what's grossly turned me off to this franchise.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. And what's even funnier is that you do all of that, right? Which is really, for whatever the motivations, whatever your opinion on it, you go through that level of reputation wash and come out on the other side worse.
Yeah.
It doesn't even work. You lose Anheuser-Busch within 60 days.
So I put a poll up on the Hogsty Twitter page. I don't do Twitter very much anymore, but I put this up. Now, and understand, if you're following us, you're still a gigantic fan Otherwise, you right.
Right.
So the question was, this is not a true unbiased poll. This is a very biased poll.
Just the crazies. A poll of the crazies.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the question was, how much of a fan of the Washington Redskins / WFT / Commanders are you today, considering all the things that have gone on both on the field and off? And the options were Commanders for life, I'm hanging on for now, no, but I could come back, and then screw them, I'm done. Well, even though the crazies, of the 5,000 or so followers we have, 4,900 of them are crazies. 47% voted Commanders for life, 39% voted hanging on for now, and then 7% to both. No, I'm not, but I could come back, and then 7% screw 'em, I'm done. So 14%. I think it was fairly telling that we got 14% of people who are crazy on Twitter to say they're not fans. I think if you magnify that by at least 2 or 3 times is the real number. Because Twitter is not a microcosm of society. Twitter is a bubble.
Yeah, and even in this case, even a bubble within a bubble within a bubble. And yes. I think also even just the reading of the poll itself, not any kind of extrapolation. If you just combine because answers B, C, and D all have some level of doubt about fandom, right? So if you just put those 3 together and put it against the ride or die people, that actually tells even a more interesting story, because that B answer, which is quite full transparency, what I voted, that's a telling answer too. I mean, it's the people like me that it's in the blood, and you can't quit it, and and can rationalize their lives away on it. But that's still a big number there too, and those people are wavering.
Well, yeah, and so if you put it all together, it's 53% of the Hogstyes crazy fandom Twitter people have doubts. 53%. And so you put that on, and I personally, I mean, I don't have a Twitter account to vote from anymore. I would have been in the screw 'em, I'm done category, just for everybody, if anybody was curious. But yeah, I would love for somebody who has a method to get this out to a real audience. I don't mean it like that, to an unbiased audience in sort of a normal poll, what you would do in a normal poll. I would love to see the results of this, because I have to think, it's got to be 75% in reality, not 53%.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that the poll comes out when people are geeked up on free agency and yada yada. So they're already the crazies, which I consider myself one. So this is it's not an insult. Are kind of wrapped up on the actual thing that they enjoy, which is the football part. So that's even try that in June, that poll, or after the next piece of info.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to be denigrating at all either. I mean, we all love football. That's kind of why we're doing it. And yeah, the crazy thing is not, and usually I mean it as an insult, but this time I did not mean it as an insult.
Right. Fans means fanatics, so that's what we mean.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see. I think there'll be more. There's this was pointed out to me. At this point, I'm just so numb to everything, but. It was pretty strange for Snyder not to be at the Carson Wentz press conference. If you just think broadly and generally about how this team has operated over its history, and how, most teams operate under its history, the owner's usually there when you sign a former number 2 all-around draft pick starting quarterback to a team with no quarterback. That's usually a time, that's usually a happy Thanksgiving, everybody situation.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Snyder's always done things a little bit differently, though, and he's terrible in front of a mic. Put aside all the sexual stuff, he's horrible on a mic.
But he's usually there.
Yes.
He may not talk.
Right, but this time he wasn't. I believe Tanya Snyder was there. It's kind of funny. I mean, Tanya Snyder was a former model who hooked up with a billionaire after he remade all his money. I'm sure she didn't sign up for any of this, to have to be the public face of an organization and all of that. I mean, she doesn't really have any more experience than Dan Snyder does at running an organization. It's just kind of funny, but no, I don't know what it says other than, the the league is still, the league sent him home without dinner, and he's still sitting in the corner, I guess is what it means.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, he's been in other things, but I definitely thought it was strange. I love making dumb, bold predictions on this show. So I'll give you a dark horse for all those that want to see Snyder gone. I'll give you a dark horse scenario.
Okay.
It's obvious that he's been pretty gross sexually, whether that's himself or what he's run. At some point, the wife gets pissed, right? So, and she's now spent a couple years kind of co-leading it, working with Jason and Ron and like kind of building up whatever this new version of the team is. At what point is a possible Snyder loses the team scenario a divorce lawsuit and somehow Tanya Snyder wins the team in a divorce?
Well, probably not. And the reason is that divorces don't care about some of these issues. Divorces have to do with a split of assets. The principal asset of this family is the stock of the team, right? And so you can't just hand Tanya Snyder the entire, the controlling interest in the stock without paying off Dan. And where's that money going to come from?
The league, maybe, financing?
The league doesn't normally get and provide a huge amount of financing like that. Unless it's an emergency, like the NBA stepped in to buy the New Orleans Pelicans or Hornets or whatever.
Right, when they were,
Yeah, but that's very, very rare. And so if you let's just do some math here. So, Washington, let's pretend they're worth about $4 billion. That's probably in the ballpark number, right? And the Snyder family collectively owns 100% of the stock. I think Dan's sister owns some small amount. I think his mother or father or somebody owns some small amount. And so that's, and that doesn't have anything to do with a Tanya and Dan divorce. So if Dan and Tanya collectively own 80%, unless they probably have a prenup, first of all, that probably addresses this.
right.
And it would probably say that Dan buys Tanya out. And so then Dan takes another loan and buys whatever portion is in Tanya's hands. He probably buys her out. But to your point, if the league sort of wants to steer Tanya to be the owner, I mean, Dan's got to have the bulk of the stock already. He's probably you got to figure he has 50% of it in his name. He has to. So I just don't know how Tanya finances all that.
Yeah, like I said, it's a wild card scenario, but I do wonder if that's somehow the path out if the owners do go to Snyder and say you need to go, but we're gonna facilitate, and maybe Snyder, maybe there is a divorce, but we're gonna facilitate, some kind of it. Then it keeps his kids being paid. I don't know, we're getting crazy, but something. At this point, I think looking at scenarios that have him not as owner, which are sticky and all have problems, right, for everybody involved. So there's no clean path out for him. But I think the Tanya path is interesting one. And I think probably would be a league preference if they could somehow pull it off.
Well, I think my preference, if I were the league, would be to have a group of influential owners, Jerry Jones, Dan, Bob, is it Dan Rooney now? I forget what Rooney's in charge up there. Bob Kraft, come to Dan and just say, look, it's over. We're not going to have a vote, but if you fight us, we will do it, and we'll do it in public. But you need to go. It's time. And then just
I wonder if they say,
sell the team entirely to somebody else. Dan cashes Tanya out. Dan cashes his mother and sister out. He keeps $2 billion of the $4 billion, and he becomes a retired billionaire, and they bring somebody else in entirely. I think that would be the more likely answer.
Godspeed to that. Whatever. I'll take whatever path. All right, so we'll put them away. Enough of them. The next story that we have is actually pretty interesting. It is, as we talked about the sort of, the broadcast booth carousel, and some media insiders have started to see what Fox News is News Corp, but specifically their Fox Sports division, in losing Aikman and Buck and letting them walk, et cetera, et cetera. Some industry insiders are starting to see this. Is this where Fox Sports is looking to sell? We know that News Corp has been selling off assets. The biggest example is the 21st Century Fox sale to Disney, which has implications here as well. But we just know that they're selling off large chunks of their portfolio, and you could imagine that the sports portfolio is an attractive package, similar to 21st Century Fox was. So some industry, now there's people reading this both ways, but this article that we read, I think in Front Row Sports, right?
Front Row Sports, Michael McCarthy, AJ Perez, dated March 24th. It was called Aikman Buck Exodus Fuel Speculation Fox Could Sell Sports Arm.
Yeah. So is this a tell? Or there's other people in the article that say maybe it's just them cutting expenditures to do something else big, and they give things like college football or some other things. Maybe it's getting some more packages. So there's industry insiders interpreting it both ways, but the majority of this article's bent was that this might be the preparation to sell Fox Sports to somebody.
Well, remember when we originally talked about this, I think I at least thought that it was very odd that they didn't make Aikman, they just let him walk.
Right. There's no negotiation.
Yeah, I thought it was very odd too.
External.
So the background here, Fox Corp, 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, Chris, is that when all this happened originally? Fox Corp owned the Fox News owned the Fox Television Network and a whole bunch of other networks, that are cable networks on there, and then the Fox Sports arm, and then they sold a bunch of it to Disney. They kept Fox News under the umbrella and the Fox News Network, but basically everything else kind of went.
It's all media based. All of it's their movie catalog, a bunch of stuff they own rights to. It's why, if you care, the Marvel Cinematic Universe will get the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. So all kinds of media-based IP and rights holdings.
Yeah, all of that used to be under the Fox Corp umbrella, is now under Disney. And so I did think it was very odd. I think it's possible. We're just kind of speculating here, of course. The sort of minority speculation here is that Fox is paring down. Let me back up. Usually when organizations get sold, you pare down contract. Even if you look at like major sports teams that get sold, when the owner wants to sell, they usually start cutting a bunch of contracts, a bunch of big name player contracts and whatnot, because they're trying to make their balance sheet look more attractive for a sale. Okay. And so that's what the article is getting at here. We let some of these guys go, some of the big money guys, more attractive asset to sell. The minority viewpoint in this thing is maybe Fox is paring down its expenditures to go out and buy, some other sort of as of yet unstated sports properties. I think it's more likely that they're going to sell than they're going to go out and buy more sports properties. Personally, it's I don't know. I mean, I could only guess and speculate. If you want to make me guess, if you make me guess, I'd probably say that I think it's more likely they're going to sell than acquire.
Well, here's a couple other data points, because we could say, okay, they're going to save $160 million over the life of the contracts by not having Buck and Aikman. So that's not chump change, right? And we talked about the broadcasting carousel in the past few shows that, you can get new talent, you can get cheaper talent, you can develop new talent. So it's not like some kind of death knell to not have Aikman and Buck, right? It's like anything else, right? You trade Tariq Hill so that you get money back to get younger wide receivers, right? You could make the same case. But here's some other data points. So I think if you just said, oh, Aikman and Buck jumped to a different network, okay, whatever, but they're giving up Thursday Night Football, or they gave up Thursday Night Football, as we see the move to Amazon as of the next season. As you said, the 21 regional sports networks were sold as part of the Disney deal, which then Disney had to go and sell to Sinclair, which I actually didn't know and was an interesting little side note. But then it got out of its 12-year relationship with the United States Golf Association, which is a bunch of TV rights to things like the U.S. Open and other big golf properties. And again, to ESPN, they lost the UFC. So, it isn't just celebrity announcers jumping. You can start to see, coupled with, them selling out of big asset like 21st Century Fox. It's a number of things that industry insiders are looking at to say something's going on there. They're either getting ready to sell or they're getting ready to cut assets to gain new ones. But something is going on.
And I'll add to this. One thing that is in the article also, what I didn't realize, Fox is the NFL's smallest media partner. What the article here that we cited quotes is Amazon is in for $469.8 billion, which I had no idea was that big. Comcast, which is NBC, $116 billion. ESPN, $67 billion. Paramount, which is CBS, $28.6 billion. Fox is just $12.9 billion. Which is, by those terms, much smaller. So it does kind of seem like they're paring down all of their liabilities as you would do in preparation for a sale. And then the question to become, who buys them? Is it just some other, media giant company? Does it get totally disbanded, and broken up into something else? Does it get absorbed? All of that, nobody knows. But I do tend to think that they're probably not in acquisition mode. I do think that if they're in any mode, maybe they just didn't like Buck and Aikman, and maybe all this is a coincidence. But there usually aren't coincidences in big business like this. So I think it's probably more likely than not that they're trying to sell off their sports arm.
And before you get excited that, either a tech company or another network, think, wow, $12 billion for an NFL package seems like a bargain, right? Let's swoop in and buy that. The NFL, they don't know for sure, but this article speculates, and I see no reason to disbelieve this, that the NFL does potentially have a kill switch about their rights in case of a sale. So it isn't necessarily even guaranteed that, entity X comes in and swoops and buys Fox Sports. The NFL has a back door to if they don't like that deal, they don't like that partner, they don't want to be in business, whatever that new entity is, they probably have a back door. So it's not a slam dunk that you would just get those NFL rights.
Yeah, and like contractually, what it is, there are provisions. I obviously haven't read these contracts, but there's going to be provision in these contracts that say in the event of the sale of Fox Sports, the NFL has a pre-approval right. And if they disapprove, then the NFL has the right to terminate the broadcast license. So yeah, you can't have like Chris and Steve swoop in with no experience whatsoever, buy Fox. Not that we could even buy the square in the parking lot of Fox Sports, but I mean, you get the point. I mean, if somebody totally unknown swoops in, if like Al Jazeera swoops in, for example, which frankly, I think a lot of people kind of praise their news coverage, but point is, somebody like that the NFL just does not want to do business with, they could just say no, and then it makes the license worthless.
Yeah, it makes them basically a negotiation partner in whatever happens here. Because the person that buys this is going to want it, so they got to make sure that's right as well. And it's important to go into the bigger context here. Robert Murdoch is, the CEO, the Grand Poobah of News Corp, is 91. He famously, if you pay any attention to, the tabloids and just, the media, doesn't, his kids and him don't have the greatest relationship. They don't have the greatest relationship with each other, right? They built a whole basically parody show on HBO called Secession that just basically deals with this topic. So you also don't know what's going on, is Murdoch blocking his kids, or is he making it easier on his kids? Is he making it easier on one kid? Does he not trust someone else to run, a multi-company empire? Is he getting it down to the one nugget to hand off? So there's also, Murdoch doesn't, and everything you would see in the machinations with his family is not super comfortable hanging this empire off to anyone. And maybe at some point he's just like, I'm riding it until I die, and I'm going to, do what's right by me. And, my kids will get paid out on that, but I don't want them running these things. And I don't want them running the empire I built.
Usually, I think if you get the history of very successful parents, the kids usually are a shell of the parents. And these kind of things. Look at the the Yankees. Look at the Lakers. All of it all became a gigantic mess for both of those organizations after the patriarch died. And it went, and yeah, I mean, I haven't watched that HBO show because I just haven't for no real reason. But certainly there's a ton of drama going on with Murdoch and the kids, Rupert Murdoch, and there's no doubt about that. And maybe he just doesn't. You're right. Maybe he just doesn't trust him to run the thing. He thinks it's going to turn into a disaster, so he's going to ride it out till he keels over here in a few years. Sell off everything, sit on the money. Yeah, it's possible.
And I'm sure some of these entities aren't, maybe these were losing money or whatever, but it's not like News Corp is a failing business, right? So these decisions to sell these assets are not they're not signs of desperation at the Robert Murdoch level.
No, Fox News is doing gangbusters by ratings and all of that.
Right. So
you guys might not agree with them, and we're not here to talk about the politics of it, but from a rating standpoint, Fox News crushes everybody.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's and I don't think they're doing this because the Murdoch empire is failing.
Oh no.
These are just made for whatever reason. But so super interesting. And just a little side note, we do now officially have the Thursday night Amazon booth, right? It was now official that it's 142-year-old Al Michaels, and in a move that I don't quite understand and will not get me excited is Curb Herbstreit as now he's a fine color guy. I just don't think he's got NFL I want NFL brains in there. I don't want some college brain.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think Kirk Herbstreit is a brilliant college analyst, but he strikes me as a college guy.
Yeah.
First and foremost, he doesn't strike me as an NFL guy. He didn't play in the NFL. He wasn't even one of these guys that, was, like Dan Orlovsky, who did, a year or two or whatever. I mean, Orlovsky is like an NFL guy. Kirk Herbstreit is the face of college football. So if you want some news on this, there's I got this from Sports Business Journal. Amazon relying on star power of Michael's Herbstreit to get Thursday night package notoriety, dated March 24th. One note in here is that this Herbstreit is going to continue to do his college football responsibilities for ESPN. So that is going to continue. So what he's going to do is Wednesday, move into the NFL city, and then Friday, then he goes home, and then Friday it starts all over again with the college, and that's what he's going to do. But I do think it's kind of an odd pairing. There's a million NFL voices you could come up with.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they got to Herbstreit. Yeah, it's kind of odd.
And it shows me, and obviously, listen, who am I to criticize Amazon's business acumen? But, when you go into a new industry and you have the money and the sort of hubris of an Amazon, sometimes you can make real cell phones, kind of step on the rake mistakes. And I think this is one. I think this shows somebody that doesn't really understand the market in which they're moving into. To me, it's a kind of a rookie mistake type of deal.
Well, yeah, they're not a media company. They haven't done this a lot. Was it on this show we talked about that the Country Music Awards or something was the first live broadcast they'd ever done, and it was kind of a disaster? Nobody watched it, and it was kind of a mess. So would it surprise? And the only time the Amazon has broadcast NFL games in the past is when the NFL licensed them a handful, a couple years ago, and they were just stealing They were just stealing the broadcast feed of the networks. They never had to put it on themselves, and it's a major operation to do this. They've got to go hire all the talent, figure out how to produce it. Amazon has no experience in this at all. None. And it's not easy. It's not, you don't just roll in there with a camera and hand Herbstreit and Al Michaels a microphone. It is way more complicated than that. And so is it possible it's going to be a train wreck for a while? Yes.
Yeah, especially if he's got his head in college football for half the week, you can't even get the commitment to him that he's going to learn this industry. Like, no one wants to hear Dick Vitale, be color guy at an NBA game,
Well, think about when ESPN at times has let Stephen A. Smith comment on football, and it's always gone badly, horribly. Sorry, we had a little Twitter thing here, but anyway, or Skype thing. But yeah, Stephen A is a basketball guy at heart, and he has always put his foot in his mouth when he talks about other things, because they do that because he gets ratings. He's their highest paid personality, and so they let him talk about what everybody doesn't go well. That could be the same with Herb Street.
Yeah, they basically told Stephen A. at this point, keep your NFL talk to bashing the Cowboys.
Yeah, that's exactly
which is
right.
fine by me. All right, so super interesting there. Obviously, more to come. One story that I think, Steve, at this point we've been following. We've been following for years at this point. Really, is this name, image, likeness story, which now that kind of the policies and all that have switched over into allowing them. Over the last year, our versions of this story have been kind of predicting what would happen, looking at some athletes that have started to take advantage of it, look at recruiting methodologies at places like the SEC that are starting to make this part of, how they recruit talent into their programs. But Adidas just announced that they're doing, 50,000 college athletic network, basically any kind of ad network, right? They'll represent or somehow support those 50 athletes. It's very vague on how. And this has got a lot of kind of marketing speak into it, and it's tied to the anniversary of Title IX and blah, blah, blah. But really super interesting that this is the first kind of large scale systemic advertiser company based plan to take advantage of these new NIL rules.
Yeah, like you said, it's very vague. So if you want to read more about this, CNBC has the story. Jessica Golden. The story was called "Adidas Announces New Network That Will Allow More Than 50,000 Student Athletes to Be Paid Ambassadors." Published March 23rd. Yeah, they don't really go into any details at all about how this is going to happen. I suspect that it will be something along the lines of sign up with us, and if you wear Adidas stuff and you put a few Instagram and TikTok ads out, we will pay you some nominal amount, because listen, marketing is all based on the number of eyeballs you can reach. And the backup center for the Iowa State soccer team does not reach a lot of eyeballs. And so this is not like a path to riches here we're talking about. It's probably, and Adidas is probably going to, it does mention in the article that there's going to be a social media component to it, which is going to mean that if you can get X number of eyeballs on your TikTok post, then we'll pay you this amount per eyeball. Something along those lines probably is going to be what it is, I would assume.
They also say some small percentage of whatever apparel sales they can attribute to you, which means they probably have like some unique code or whatever. They have a way to do that. So those are the two things. Still very few details, but those are the two paths to money.
Yeah, and I having run the Hogsty for 6 years, it's all about number of eyeballs, for these ads, and the idea again that the backup center for the Iowa State soccer team can get enough eyeballs to have a substantial amount of money on his Instagram is slim and none, unless he's already got a big social media following. So it's just not a path of riches for these guys. It's a path to lunch money, for most of them.
Yeah, which I think we've always talked about, that this is probably outside of whatever top 5% or top 3% of the celebrity athletes in football and basketball, and maybe in some unique cases in some of the women's sports. This was always a pocket money, right? This is always like a sort of a, the benefit to the college athlete was that at least that's free you up to, like any college kid, can earn, you can go have a high paid internship in law school or in pre-law, whatever, and get paid, or there's all kinds of ways to make money off, a student can make money off what they're learning and what they're growing to be. So this just sort of opens that up. And you're right. This is for the majority of college athletics. This is a lunch money or spending money plan. And this sort of backs that up. The other interesting thing here that's even more systemic in this article is that this is going to be associated with Adidas universities, right? Where Adidas already has a fiscal relationship with the school, right? Which is that we wear Adidas, all that. And I think that in the article, they even say how many schools are in the Adidas network. So if you start to think about this, this becomes a value. This is why it's important to the universities. This is a value add in their recruitment. And that's important all the way down the college athletics chain, right? Because, you're still recruiting for talent, even if it's women's lacrosse. And So now you can say we're an Adidas school, and you come to our school, and you can opt into the NIL program.
Yeah, it's 109 schools is what the article says. 123 sports and 109 schools. Yeah, this is definitely like going to fund your late night post bar Taco Bell run. This is not going to be a get rich thing for most of these people. What the quote here from Adidas is this: the Adidas NIL network embodies our belief that sport has the power to change lives by upskilling athletes, giving them the ability to begin to experience an entrepreneurial path that will carry them beyond their college years. Jim Murphy, Adidas NCAA program lead. So when you hear things like begin to experience an entrepreneurial path, that is code for we're going to pay you 2 cents. We expect to pay you 2 cents. You're not going to get Trevor Lawrence money. But listen, I mean, it's something. It's a major company taking advantage of the new law, and if it helps out these kids, to make a little bit of money, God bless them.
Yeah, and you can start to see what the sort of big money, big companies, big advertising, how they're going to start to work this into how they do business, right? This is just new business models.
Yeah, and from Adidas perspective, if like one again, that backup center at Iowa State isn't going to get too many eyeballs on Adidas, but taken as a whole, 30,000 of these athletes from Adidas perspective is going to matter, and it is going to get more eyeballs on Adidas products. And so taken from that perspective, it's valuable to Adidas. It just they're looking at it as sort of a totality of the circumstances perspective. If we get enough of these unknown kids together, it'll be worth our time to pay them. Pay them all 5 cents. If you pay 50,000 people 5 cents, it's going to add up to, a little bit, real money for Adidas maybe, but it'll be worthwhile because taken in total, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on their products.
They're paying a lot less for that talent than they would in a different market, right? So even if you take the star spiker on the UCLA's women volleyball team, and she's someone that can probably take advantage of this system to some degree.
Right.
They're still paying her way less than they would for similar advertising in a more open market. So for them, it's, in your point, it's aggregate marketing, it's aggregate advertising. Yes. Other people are doing the work for you, and you're paying them pennies on the dollar. What that would be in a more open market.
Yeah, they don't have to produce any ads.
No.
They'll just let you post Instagram photos of Adidas gear and do whatever you want. And if you get 100 eyeballs on it, we'll pay you a dime, fine. But if we could get 20,000 of you to do that, it's actually adds up to real numbers for us, even if we're paying all of you 5 cents each.
Yeah. The really interesting thing, this goes beyond this Adidas thing, but, if you want to look for comps and how this will work, as this starts to, we just get years out from this decision, look at non-college sports like skateboarding or other things. They pay people to use their stuff all the time. There's all kinds of ways in which, we're sports or physical activities that have audiences, let's call them, know how to do this. They just don't have, in those situations, they don't have to deal with the NCAA, right? So you're going to start to see, like, use my stick. We'll pay you to use my stick in lacrosse. Or, you'll start to see all these kind of things that happen in all these other venues that aren't ruled by the NCAA.
Well, listen, I mean, we've had this at the Hogsty, okay? Hogsty, we have our audience, and we appreciate anybody who's ever listened and read our stories and all of that. But our advertisers don't come to us expecting to get a Super Bowl advertiser. For them, we are part of the aggregate. They pay us 5 cents. We do our little ad, and they pay enough of these 5 cent things, and they're going to get eyeballs on their product. That's kind of what it is, and we understand our role in this. And yeah, in terms of like the skateboarding guys and whatnot, a lot of those people have sponsors. There's about 3 of them who could, who are public, who are names that the public knows. But if you sponsor enough of them, eventually you're going to get you're going to get your product out there, I think. And that's kind of what Adidas is doing here.
Yeah, and skateboard, whether it's tennis shoes or skateboards. They're not looking to sell those things to my mom, right? They want more targeted marketing. So, they're going right into the markets and the communities that actually would care about those products.
And the beauty of it is that Adidas gets to pretend like they care about developing the entrepreneurial spirit of college athletes. When what they're really doing is saving money on marketing costs. So, they spend the amount of money that it would take to produce one ad during the Super Bowl, and they get 50,000 people doing their advertising for them. The cynic would take the view that they're taking advantage of these people for their own good and couching it in some sort of like public service.
Yeah. And then they also got a bunch of like basically public service announcement messaging out of it because they connected to Title IX. Yeah. So it's fascinating how they marketed this, which is, smart on them, because then 6 months later, it won't matter. The program will just be running.
So for those of you who are curious, what Chris keeps talking about Title IX, this article talks about Title IX, in which apparently I didn't know it was 1972, but it was passed by Congress, signed into law by President Richard Nixon in 1972. And so Title IX is the federal law that said, there's a quote in here. This is from Title IX. No person in the United States shall, based on sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. That is the law that forces universities to spend the same money on women's sports as they do on men's sports, which is why there are a lot more women's sports in many universities, because they have a legal obligation under federal law to give just as many scholarships in the amount of scholarship money to women as they do men. And that's why college sports is organized like it is.
And it's why it's 50,000.
I was about to go into a Leah Thomas rant, but I'll spare you.
And that's why it's 50,000. That's why the announceable number is 50,000, because it's the 50th anniversary. I mean, it's all tied up. I didn't realize that both me and Title IX are going to turn 50 this year. So there you go.
You're an old man, Chris.
I know. Jesus. All right. So that's super interesting. This NIL is going to give us stories. And, as we head into this college football year, we can pick an NIL, and probably will on most weeks, an NIL story every show, because that's what it's going to be like now coming up.
Yeah. Hashtag content.
Yeah. Last thing is we've been talking a lot about Major League Baseball, because of their labor strife and now their labor harmony and blah, blah, blah. But, always after you have these kind of negotiations, the numbers trickle out, right? We start to see what they were talking about, what they were fighting out, what was the size of the pie that they want divided, because everyone's got to make their justifications, and it's just you find the details out after the deals are done. So we got some valuations on some Major League Baseball franchises that sort of tell an interesting story that these are kind of, the valuations are up across the board. They're obviously up at the most at the top of the the Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox level, but it looks like the players, or there was more pie to be divided.
Yeah. So the original story we found on this came from Front Office Sports. MLB teams average record value of $2 billion. Justin Byers, March 24th. And what they're really doing is referencing Forbes article about this. Forbes article came out. There's no date, but Forbes article is called "Baseball's Most Valuable Teams 2022" by Mike Ozenian and Justin Teitelbaum. So it shouldn't be surprise no one to realize that the most valuable franchises in MLB are the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Red Sox, right? Everybody should be able to guess that. What was far more interesting to me is the number. The Yankees, according to Forbes, are worth $6 billion, with the Dodgers coming in second place with $4 billion. And then the Red Sox are at 4.07 billion. Red Sox at 3.9 billion. And then last, I would have you guess, Chris, but you already guessed it pre-show, so there's no point to the guess. The Miami Marlins, last place. There's a shock. $6 billion, $4 billion. That those numbers surprise me greatly because historically, Major League Baseball franchises have not been as valuable as some of the lead NFL teams.
Yeah, so it's second only in U.S. sports to the Dallas Cowboys, the Yankees now.
Yes.
Which, if many people off the street that have a even passing knowledge of sports would have probably, you give them a couple guesses, they're probably going to guess Yankees and Cowboys, right? Like, so that's not super surprising, but I agree with you. The numbers are surprising. I would have thought that the gap would have been bigger, and it really shows to me. It to me really does see why it took. Now I don't think there's much damage done, but it's why it was a little trickier negotiation this time. The numbers and something that I wouldn't necessarily guess, but the financials of baseball seem pretty strong.
Oh, absolutely. And it does tie into the negotiations. And this is why the owners were so careful to protect the basic structure of the economics of baseball. And it's why that they were so careful to protect the cut of money that they wanted to give the players. That's absolutely right. Forbes, by the way, has Dallas. You want to take a guess? I have it in the Forbes article as to the value of the Cowboys.
I don't have it, so I can't take a guess. I would say, let's see. If we're estimating that Denver will set this sort of new for sale bar here when they sell, and I think that's going to be between $4 and $5 billion if I guess there. So I would say Dallas's probably valuation is somewhere at maybe I'm going to go double that just for all of the various things, including that stadium. So I'd say the valuation for the Cowboys empire, whatever, and all of its holding is probably between $8 to $10 billion.
Well, Forbes has it at 6.5, but they're talking about right now. And
Right.
So the impact of the Broncos sale may have an effect, and that's not what Forbes has projected. So, yeah, I mean, it'll certainly go up if the Denver Broncos, for God's sake, sell for $4 billion. What are the Cowboys worth? Yeah, maybe 8, maybe. That's what I would guess. So here's the real quick list. So we already did Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox, Cubs, Giants, Mets. All in the Cubs and Giants in the $3 billion range. The Mets $2.65 billion. The Cardinals are $2.45 billion. The Phillies, the Angels, the Braves. That's the top 10. Let's go down to the bottom 10. Rockies 20, Arizona Diamondbacks 21, Orioles $1.375 billion. Pittsburgh Pirates $1.3 billion. Cleveland, Indians / Guardians, Milwaukee Brewers. Oh, advertisements going crazy. Cincinnati Reds, Oakland A's, Kansas City Royals, Tampa Bay Rays, Miami Marlins are 30. The Rays, they've got it $1.1 billion. The Marlins, they've got it $990 million. Think about the disparity here. The Yankees were $6 billion. The Marlins are worth less than 6 times that amount.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say, that Yankees are 5 times more valuable than the bottom 2 teams, basically.
Exactly right, because they've got the Rays at $1.1 billion.
No, that is nuts. Although I wouldn't have guessed that those 2 franchises would have. I wouldn't have guessed that the Marlins are the one that's $1 billion. I wouldn't have guessed that Marlins would have even been at the $1 billion line.
Well, they had them at $990 million, so they're a little bit under.
Where the Rays are the ones up from there, right?
The one that surprises me a little bit on this list is the Pittsburgh Pirates. That they're this high, that they're number 23, $1.3 billion. Pittsburgh Pirates have been one of the biggest cheapskates in baseball for years, decades at this point. I wouldn't have guessed that they would have been worth that much money. I would have thought they would have been number 28.
Yeah, it shows you that they could be competing a little bit more than they have.
That's right.
Super fascinating. These are not Yank. Obviously, I don't know if I would have I would have guessed that high, but I would have obviously guessed them at number 1. But yeah, so baseball seems to be doing pretty well financially. Yeah. Now, Steve, we're about to wrap, but I'm gonna drop one story on you that I just saw come across. This may be a sneak preview, and it's a story we talked about before, and we didn't really touch on. But obviously the Deshaun Watson stuff has evolved since the last time we talked to it. Trade to Cleveland, guaranteed contract, blah blah blah. I think the last time we spoke about this was after the that first grand jury. Now a second grand jury has decided not to bring criminal charges. And okay, whatever on all that. But do you find it interesting, and I just saw a thing come across just in the last 10 minutes, that Jimmy Haslam is kind of going out of his way to say this idea didn't come from me. And they did that separate press conference, I think yesterday or Thursday, recently. And you also have some interesting things happening. The league's probably still, we predicted a couple weeks ago, will still probably take some action now that we've got some more details are locked in. And it's interesting how they structured his contract where he wouldn't take a giant financial hit if he takes a big suspension this year. The way they structured his contract actually is expecting a suspension. Could this deal ruin the Cleveland Browns?
Is it possible to ruin the Cleveland Browns more than they've already ruined themselves?
I guess into non-existence.
Jimmy Haslam is a scumbag himself. Okay, Jimmy Haslam came 5 minutes away from being indicted by the federal government for fraud and corruption charges in conjunction with the Flying J truck stop line he owns. The investigation and the indictment stopped like one level below him. Jimmy Haslam is not innocent here. I think it's very, very odd. I had not seen this story, so you're springing this on me. I think it's very unusual that the owner has like a disclaimer here. Yeah. Because also, usually having been inside the building of a couple one NFL team and dealt with another one, usually the leadership does get involved in major signings like this. Doesn't just stop at the general manager and the head coach. When you're bringing in a major quarterback, it's almost a guarantee that the owner has blessed this. Especially with it's fully guaranteed contract here, which is, first of all, if you're giving anybody a fully guaranteed contract, you're insane and crazy in football. But beyond that, I find it almost impossible to think that Jimmy Haslam did not sign off on this. So I don't believe him, and I think he's lying.
Oh, I definitely agree. And here's the quote. It was definitely conceived by football operations, Haslam said. I can tell you it was widely vetted throughout our organization, including ownership, but it was conceived in the football operations. So there's no world in which you give someone a $230 million guaranteed contract and the owner doesn't know and signed off on it. However, and that probably, yes, most football moves come through the football operations and get the blessing of the owner, and to what degree they're part of that is different in all 32 NFL teams, right? They don't usually come out and say, the weirdness here is two separate press conferences and then the owner going out of his way now multiple times to draw a distinction that is the reality of every NFL club.
But it's basically Jimmy Haslam going, look, if this blows up, it's not on me, it's on them. And it also means I'm going to fire him if it does blow up. That's the other thing it means.
Yeah.
But could it ruin, to answer your question, could it ruin the Cleveland Browns? I mean, yes. What if Deshaun Watson can't play for a year? They're going to still be stuck with him. Was a 5-year deal, Yeah. And so that's 80 million. No, that's not right. 40 plus million average annual value. And for a guy who can't play, and the other thing is, you're signing up Deshaun Watson to be the face of your franchise. This is not exactly a way to show that you care about the treatment of women. When you're trying to court the female viewer and female football fan, how do you do that with a guy who mistreated 22 separate masseuses? It's very cynical. Thank God that Washington did not sign up for that, because that's the last thing they need. But this is Jimmy Haslam simultaneously embracing it and distancing himself from it at the same time.
Yeah, no, totally fascinating. And I want to, before we sign off, I made a note of it this week in my own head. I wanted to give, Steve props, and I don't think this is the full story, but it was an interesting data point when we talked about Patrick Mahomes' 10-year mega contract, which that seems quaint now, but you said that they would have You said at the time it would have significant implications on how they ran their football operations. And, out of the blue this week, no one was predicting this. They deal Tariq Hill because they knew they couldn't sign him in their financial reality, and picks and money earlier rather than losing him later was the smart and prudent football decision. But it was predetermined by the Patrick Mahomes contract, which you did predict. So I wanted to give you retro props.
Well, I appreciate that, Chris, and it just goes to show that one of these NFL teams needs to hire me as a consultant so I can straighten them out.
There you go. Ultimately, I don't think it hurts Kansas City that much, and I think they made a very shrewd deal. But if they didn't have that, if that Mahomes contract wasn't sitting on their books, they would not be looking to deal.
Tyreek Hill would be a Chief today.
Yeah, exactly. So it has implications for sure.
Yeah.
Steve, you're probably going to be recording the next Hogsty within the next 40 minutes. So what do you predict you're talking about?
Well, all the latest in Washington, Washington football news, of course, and we're in the middle of draft previews by position groups, so we'll do that, and all the latest Redskin or Washington news. Seasons of Discontent has come back, at least for now, so check those out. That's Washington. That's Rick Snyder's look at all things Washington D.C. sports and life. He talked in the last show about Maryland basketball for a while. It's not just all football, folks. So tune into that. And we've got all of our regular written content.
All right. So we will see you in 2 weeks.